This video is called Taking Away the Tools because Christianity has been built upon some fairly impressive systems of thought, and they use certain tools to accomplish this. The goal for the Christian evangelist is to build these systems of thought inside of your mind so that you see things the way they do. They use certain tools to accomplish this, and I find these tools to be very dishonest. I'm taking away the tools. These are the common arguments that atheists run up against, the usual points made in attempts at evangelism, and the usual building blocks that start Christians along their journey. The first tool is faith. Faith is the only virtue that isn't a virtue when applied to something secular. Belief in something without evidence is only considered good when it is applied to deities. Now, Christians will try to muddy the waters in an attempt to say that faith is a good thing, even when it isn't tied to religion. They'll say that people have faith when they book an airline ticket that they will get to their destination, or that people have faith that they will live whenever they put money into their retirement account, or other such things that presume a certain future will come about. So is it good to have faith? Faith is a very flexible word, and Christians are abusing that flexibility. Faith in yourself that you can get through a very difficult time is very different than faith in a Stone Age story about an unobserved spirit. Christians are trying to equate faith in an unobserved, all-powerful being, unlike anything we've ever seen or observed in the known universe, with likely scenarios with a proven track record. The next tool Christians use is evasion. While watching clips on YouTube, you can see this a lot. An atheist will ask a Christian a simple question, and the Christian will dance around the answer, prefacing it with presumptions and special situations and other nonsense before they answer the question. In essence, the Christian is trying to create a false framework in your mind that will make his answer correct. You see this a lot on shows like the Atheist Experience. A question they often ask is, "Do you think I'm going to hell?" The answer is obvious, yet the callers never come out and say it. They say such things as, "It's not my place to judge," or, "That's God's decision and not mine." Anyone who has read the Bible should know the fate that the Bible pronounces on any atheist. Another such question they ask is, "Would your God murder an innocent person?" The answer is again obvious. God has killed thousands of innocent people, but Christians can never come out and just say the answer. The very soul of Christianity is the praise of God murdering an innocent man, and still they can't answer this question directly. Another tool they use is circular reasoning. The easiest way to explain this is that circular reasoning is true because circular reasoning is true. Let's start at the beginning. How do we know that there is a God? We know that there is a God because there is a Bible that tells us about a God. How do we know that the Bible is correct? Because God wrote the Bible. How do we know that God wrote the Bible? Because one of the authors of the Bible told us that God wrote the Bible. How do we know that he was telling the truth? Because his writings are in the Bible. Okay, so that's an obvious one, but Christian faith is full of circular reasoning because it is the only way that they can justify many of their claims. Even faith is circular in nature. I believe because I believe because I believe. Circular reasoning is a brilliant tool for comedy. It is a very poor way to carry out a serious discussion. The next tool Christians use is presumption. Mostly you see this in the loaded questions that they ask, such as, who created the world if God didn't? The presumption is that the world was created by something with intent. The same kind of presumption that leads Christians to believe that mankind, out of all things in the universe, is really the focus of an infinite being. The same kind of presumption that leads Christians to worry about a thing called a soul. Presumption is also the error that leads Christians to quote Bible verses at atheists. They presume the Bible is correct, inerrant, and God-spoken truth. They also presume that the verses are convincing. These verses are about as convincing to atheists as passages from the Quran are to Christians. They are poetry and myths written by a Bronze Age author. At the heart of Christianity, presumption plays a more central role. First, Christians establish the truth that God exists, as a presumption of course, and then they try to bend the rest of their knowledge around that central idea. This is where we get those young Earth creationists who insist that dragons and dinosaurs existed 4,000 years ago, walking off the ark with all the other millions of species, but those species were smart enough to survive the worldwide swamp that was left behind. This is where you get Westboro Baptist Church attributing natural disasters to the judgment of an all-powerful and homophobic deity. Other religions suffer from this also. This is where you get people strapping bombs to their chests and flying planes into buildings. This is where you get people tied down to a table and a knife thrust through their chest in an attempt to bring forth rainwater. This is where you get firstborn children placed into a fire until they die. Each of these actions presumes that there is a greater deity out there that will give rewards for these actions. The next tool is logical fallacy. A logical fallacy is when someone uses a meaningless argument to prove a point. Almost anything that Ray Comfort says falls into this category. I like to call this tool the gap tool because there is a very large and unexplained gap between the proof provided at point A and the conclusion drawn at point B. It is also accompanied with the God of the gaps. For instance, when you see a human eye, what do you see? Do you see just an eye? Do you see the result of millions of years of evolution? Or do you see proof that a talking snake once tricked mankind into falling from grace, risking its eternal soul to a pit of unyielding torment? Ray Comfort seems to think that last option is the best one. The human eye is proof of God, and not just any God, but the Christian God. So we start at point A, a human eye, and then immediately go to point B, which is a divine being who writes books. The gap in the middle is vast. The reason Ray gets away with it is that he claims that the human eye couldn't have come from anywhere else. The human eye can easily be explained using the theory of evolution. In the description below, there is a video that explains it in less than 5 minutes. This tool is often used with strawman arguments, using God or the Bible to get across whatever agenda a particular group is trying to progress. Another tool Christians use, and I find it the most offensive, is the word game. Spinning words and forcing conclusions the same way a comedian would is an offensive way to try to prove that God exists. C.S. Lewis's Lord, Liar, Lunatic proposition comes to mind, along with Ray Comfort's Who Created the World, or Pascal's Wager. Would someone with Yahweh's supposed credentials, personality, or power really need a tricky word game to prove he exists? A rather annoying tool used is exaggerated defense. It's best used in a how dare you situation, and this defense is actually used in the Bible. The way this tool is best used is to get out of answering a question with an obvious and uncomfortable answer. Paul, the writer of Romans, did this. After explaining that God predestines certain people to heaven and others to the fires of hell, Paul states a question that his readers might be asking. Why does he still find fault? For who resists his will? Paul answers, on the contrary, who are you, O man, who answers back to God? See how this tool is designed to shift their uncomfortable squirminess about the tone of the conversation back to you? God also pulls the same trick in the book of Job. The last tool that Christians use is the Bible. Christians certainly talk a big game about it, yet only 10% of Christians have actually read it, according to the Pew polls. The problem with the Bible is that it is hardly convincing, but there are so many errors with this perfect book that I can't even address them all here in a 10-minute video. I'll go in more depth with each of the tools in other videos. I wanted to address the Christian tools before I really got into the atheist-theist debate, because I'm trying to progress the conversation beyond the usual trolling found on YouTube. Pulling the faith card, avoiding the topic at hand, digressing to circular reasoning, pretending that God's existence is already established, using incomplete arguments, pretending to be offended, and quoting Bible verses as fact will not get anyone very far.